Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavaditam Astuma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. And may we also have good questions, because this is question and answer session for spiritual seekers. And so I'll mute my microphone so you have a chance to formulate some useful questions, and we'll take it from there.
My question is very easy. When we say it's possible to see God, what does it mean? Is it possible to see Him with our eyes? What does it mean? Or it just is it when you see a poor man or something like that? What does it mean to see God? Is it possible to see Him? Is it really possible? It's a question.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And of course, it was a question that Swami Vivekananda himself asked many, many people. Finally, he asked Ramakrishna in the early days of his meeting, "Have you seen God?" That was his question. And the response was very dramatic. It started off with Ramakrishna laughing at the whole idea, because he said, "Yes, I have seen God, but I also see Him here and now. I see Him more real than you sitting there, and you also can see Him." And the last part was very significant. So is it possible to see God? Yes, it's possible to see God. In fact, it's necessary. But what do we mean by to see? So now we can imagine Ramakrishna sitting there, the young boy Narendra sitting in front with a group of people around, and the question is asked. Clearly, Ramakrishna had his eyes open. So he must have seen something other than what we normally see in front. And when we talk about seeing, we're talking about using the eyes and all the objects that we see. So many different things, characterized by recognizable shapes, colors, characteristics, which help us identify this is this and this is that. But the same thing goes for the ears. The ears pick up sounds, but there's an extra dimension to it. When the ears pick up sounds, they don't just pick up random sounds. When a voice speaks, they might praise us or they might condemn us. There's another reaction, another kind of seeing which is there, and that is seeing the reaction that we have to praise or blame. Somebody praises us, our chest gets inflated, we feel good. Somebody blames us, we shrivel a little bit, we don't feel good, we ponder why, we look for a response, etc. So there are several kinds of seeing. We are seeing with the eyes, but there's an internal kind of seeing as well. That internal kind of seeing is whenever a word is produced in front of us, whenever it is evoked in the mind, concept also comes. And the concept is in the form of a picture. As a sound which is produced is a symbol, it has a form, but there's also a subtle version of it. Some duplication of it appears in what we might call the mind. Now, where is the mind? We don't know. We just can see it in our mind's eye as the expression. Now, there's another kind of seeing. It is watching this mind and watching these pictures in the mind. Another kind of seeing is watching decisions that are being made. And another kind of seeing, now we have to see more internally. We can have an insight, as it's called, we have to now go and have a more penetrating vision beyond this external interpretation of what we think we see. And what we find there is a supreme seer, some entity that sees. Now, if you are able internally to see that, means feel that, to connect with that, a kind of internal inspiration. There are many, many people today debating, for some reason or other in this modern era, something that has been debated for thousands and thousands of years ago. And that is the question of, is there such a thing as an author somewhere, as a supreme principle somewhere, as a God somewhere? And this goes back, as I say, many, many years, because we take for granted the things which are in front and leave it there and react from there. The world for us is what we see, and we cannot see beyond that. But can you prove it? Can you prove that this world exists? You might say yes. Things exist in relation to the sense organs, seeing, touching, tasting. But they also disappear. So a good philosophical analysis, that means somebody who questions every kind of conscious perception that we have, will not leave it to our normal common day, so-called normal common day waking experience. They will now ask questions about dream. They'll now ask questions about what happens to our consciousness when everything seems to disappear and a kind of unity of existence is felt, is understood. So these are questions. Now, some of these questions are being asked in the Prashna Upanishad. The Prashna Upanishad, 6 questions are being asked, as the Upanishad suggests. And when we study this, we'll see these are the most fundamental questions, going from the gross to the more subtle. And any teacher worth their salt will not accept a student straight away. We have this session on Wednesday evenings, question and answer for spiritual seekers. We're all assuming that you passed currency as a seeker. The fact that you're here, the fact that you're here every Wednesday and more, is evidence that you're earnest about these kinds of subjects. It's not a frivolous thing for you. But you see, there's a difference between a casual inquiry and wanting to actually experience. When we say see God, we mean actually experience that. Experiencing in what sense? With the inner eye of intuition. The external eye sees the external things. The internal eye sees the internal things. This is the eye of intuition. Yogis call this the third eye, and modern New Age movements have taken this. I'll always remember a book, a series of books actually, in the 1960s from called Lobsang Rampa. Lobsang Rampa was supposed to be a Tibetan Lama, and he picked up the subject of a third eye, and he says there, as if it was his experience in Tibet, yes, to open up the third eye, they drilled a hole here for me, or they put a pressure here for me, that kind of thing. Well, of course, there's no such thing as a he's thinking of physical third eye, no such thing. We misunderstand, misinterpret that. No, what we're talking about is the internal eye of intuition, where we see not only God, but we see more and more subtle things, not obvious to the physical eyes. Behind the physical eyes will be the inner eyes that always remain awake, and when the physical eyes shut, the internal eyes remain open. They're part of our psyche. But there's also, of course, the revelation of life. What is life? And life is put in the language in the Prashna Upanishad as prana. The first question being asked is, where does all of this come from? The things that we see, where does it come from? How does it arise? Now, a good teacher won't give you the ultimate thing. That'll be too far. You're standing here. There's no point in giving you something there. If you're a child, You'll learn 1 plus 1, 2 plus 2, etc., maybe with the help of objects, 2 oranges, 2 apples. You won't teach a child calculus. You won't teach a child, algebra or any of these things, or geometry. No, that would be too much. You teach them step by step. It is the same thing in spiritual life. A good teacher will say the bare minimum, even before the bare minimum, of course. The students approach the teacher, people are in this case, and they have questions in reserve, but he doesn't want questions to start with. You stay here, please. And since you approached me, let us evaluate whether you are worthy students. So after some time, the students ask questions. The questions amount to what is all of this? Where does life come from? And so on and so forth. And then the second question is, what keeps this going? What is the life force that keeps things going? So far, we're just talking about physics. But is it just physics? Or the internal intuition tells us that there's a connectivity. And so it progresses. What is the life force? How does it keep things going? And if it happens in us, can we extrapolate it universally? And the idea is normally, yes, we can extrapolate it. What happens here happens everywhere. It is an axiomatic principle. And then another question will be, all right, so now what happens in dream or in deep sleep and all of these things? And then what is this Om? And then what is that supreme principle? All these questions are being asked, leading us to more and more subtle insights. Now, how do we get such insights? And we come back to Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna, with the eyes open, saw only God. He saw God there not only in Vivekananda and others, but he saw God through them and as them. This kind of penetrating vision came because, first of all, he saw God in himself and around himself. And this wasn't the first time. From the age of, let's say, from an early age, he understood that. Don't forget, the first recorded spiritual experience he had. He was walking as children do and eating puffed rice and in the paddy fields there, and he looks up and the rain clouds are there, and against the red clouds we see a flock of cranes, white cranes there. And cranes, birds actually. And we can only surmise that the sense of deep beauty, the sense of, gave him an internal sense of ecstatic joy to the extent that his whole mind was overwhelmed with it and he fell down unconscious. We see then that when he was playing the part of Shiva on Shivaratri, the actor was falling sick, he had to take the place. He not only took the part but absorbed the role so beautifully. Don't forget, Shiva will have the obvious third eye. And this absorption into this character of Shiva became so real to him that he experienced oneness with Shiva. And then we'll see how his whole life was intensive. By what means? By using time in a creative way, by seeing all the opportunities for play, extended periods by himself, thoughtfulness, a kind of artistic temperament. And with this artistic temperament evoking the sense of creativity, he had then access to these subtle internal things, these internal moods and modes. And so he saw things differently. And when he saw things differently, he could absolutely say, yes, I see him now. And I see him as more real than you standing there. And if I can do it, also you can do it, anybody can do it. You also can do it. How do you do it? by following a set of disciplines that lead you internally to more and more increasing subtle areas, levels or layers of consciousness, if you like, in yogic language called chakras, and opening up each level and layer of consciousness more and more the deeper you go, so that you see not just God, but you see these various layers and levels. Ultimately, the understanding is there is only that one being. There is nothing else than that. Only one without a second. So that with eyes open, I see the totality in various modified different forms. I see that this one entity that we call God, seemingly fragmented into all of these various colors and shapes and forms and sounds and impressions, and registering everything therefore to that account. Supposing you're able to do this, and you are, with practice, what will be the condition of your life? Will you have any problems? No, we won't call them problems anymore. We'll call them delightful episodes in the wonderful game of life. We'll know how to play it because our whole eyes will be colored with the collyrium of jnana, knowledge. We'll have this deep insight into everything, which gives us an eternal, internal, ecstatic joy. We won't have to look for joy. Joy will find us, so to speak. So, yes, we are able to see God, we're able to feel God, and if you open your eyes now, you'll see God, because everything that you see is that same God. We start off with seeing God inside everything. We practice it for a number of months, a number of years. What does it mean? It means that you have the capacity to use your imagination and see inside, in the cave of the heart of everything and everybody, is the Lord of the universe. Then a little further, that same presence is inside every eye, every ear, every head, every hand, every arm, every foot, every limb. And then a little further, every capacity to speak, every capacity to hear, every capacity to move, a life-giving force, a life force. And then a little further, you are the indweller of all beings. You are that. And repeatedly the same formula is there throughout the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and so on. See the self, the supreme quintessential being in all beings, not just human beings, and all beings in that self. This is a shift in our understanding, a shift in the way we interpret seeing or hearing or touching, tasting, and so on. This shift is very significant. We can make it in one go, or we can do it progressively. For most people, better to do it progressively. So these 6 questions that are asked in the Prishna Upanishad are progressive questions, going from the outside to the inside gradually. And we enjoy the journey of it. No need to be frustrated with it or worried about it. We have a provision, you can say a divinely inserted sense of a sequence which we call time. And inserted there is the opportunity to see the individualities, that is, the manifested modifications of that one entity. And people are arguing about an omnipresent, omnipotent God, whether that such a thing exists or not. So we have just come off a retreat last weekend, or not last weekend, but the weekend before that. And typically one of the exercises is go out in the good weather, and Dalgan Park, where we have the retreats, 500 acres are there. Go and walk in the forest areas, walk in the fields, walk along the pathways, look at the trees. Don't just look at them, feel their leaves, smell the air, be mindful of how you walk. And learn this mindfulness whereby, even if you're sitting by yourself, within 4 blank walls, See, I often quote, you see, Julian Norwich, who decided voluntarily to do that. Put me in a small room with only two openings, one to receive food from the one side, the other one to connect me to all the things going on in the church. But otherwise, I'm quite happy. No, you see, we can upgrade it. No television, no computers, no telephones, nothing like that. Most people in this modern age will go half mad. When we do the retreat, well, formally, I used to take all the cell phones, but then I realized people want to take pictures. So the rule is the cell phones can only be used to take pictures. Previously, I put all cell phones in a box, and at the end of the retreat, they took the cell phones away. Hopefully, you'll take one which is better than the one you had, and that's it. But you see, you can see people's reactions when you say, when I used to say, you leave your cell phone here. It was as if you were asking them to put their whole life support system. It's like this essential thing. It's like taking all your clothing off and putting them into a box. So vital would these cell phones be. Now, modern technology is useful. We are using it now. But if we don't use it properly, it is also a waste of time. So we have to make sure that we don't respond to technology in one go and be tempted for technology to rule us. Instead of being slaves of technology, we need to be masters of technology. In this same way, we have to be masters of the body and the mind. We have to train the mind to see things in a more authentic way. That is, to have a penetrating vision and attribute all the things that move to a mover. We make a mistake, often compared to looking at a tree waving in the wind. Somebody who doesn't know any better may well say, let's say a child may say, how does this tree move by itself? No, it doesn't. It simply is responding to the movement of the wind. It is the wind that is moving it. So we have to attribute the moving element, the life-giving element, not to the inert objects that we see, but to see what is moving it, what is the prime mover, what is that being that sustains that. We take so much for granted. The relative world for us, we never question. We just take it for granted. And taking it for granted also means largely wasting our time. Instead of inserting something there, something of great value, which is the mobilizer of everything. So the Prashna Upanishad asks, where does it all come from? How does it arise? Where does it arise from? And the answer given is what we might say today is a valid physics answer. It comes out in two things. And to help picture this duality, we are given male and female components. So one is called Prana, a force, a moving force. Now in the tantric system, Prana is equated to Shakti, and Shakti is feminine. But Prana in this case is masculine. And then it corresponds to Rai. Rai is matter, food, literally food. So matter and energy are the two originators of everything. And from there we find so many different examples. The sun and moon is given as an example. The dark and light fortnight is given an example. The waxing and waning of the moon is given an example. So all of these things are given as analogies. Well, then the next question is, well, this force, this subtle prana that acts on this rai, this food, this matter, energy and matter being there, we know the origin, but what's the thing that keeps it going? And the answer is, it is prana, it is the energy that keeps it going. Energy, life force, the life component. In the whole universe, yes, but if you want to understand it, you take this human body as an example. And then you can divide this energy appearing as a governing force in 5 ways. Prana is regulating the inhalation of the air and all the areas around the head and so on, like that, the upper part of the body, you may say. Then there's Aparna, its opposite, that is regulating the pelvic area down below. And then, of course, there is Samana, that is regulating the digestive system. And then we can visualize it as a kind of flow of energy. What we call disease is when this flow is disrupted. And the first thing is try and find out how we can restabilize this flow. Dhyana, the circulatory system, responsible for the whole distribution of things throughout the body. And finally, Udana, regulating the head and upwards, the rising upwards from there. Really the voice, this and upwards, Udana. Well, last night as was told, we went through the wonderful, wonderful yogic extraction that Vivekananda had. He was a master of yoga, and how he managed to simply carefully extract himself from the physical body.
Could I ask, Swamiji, sorry,
Yeah.
could I just ask, is that by his mastery of the Kundalini? Is that what we would call that?
Yes, you might call that. Don't forget, we have many ways of describing things. The yogic way of describing things would be the Kundalini. Yes.
Right, it would. So that is the vital force. That would be the equivalent.
Yes, that is the internal vital force at its most fundamental level.
Right.
And that vital force opens up itself, if you like. So this is described in the language of vortexes or wheels or chakras, but we have to understand what a chakra means. It is a layer or level of consciousness. It is a level of the mind. Another wonderful description that I often give is, you see, you have a light which is there, and then you have various layers and levels on the top. We can put it like Perspex shades, if you like, with different colors. So one screen is there, it's green, let's say. One screen, another color, and so on and so forth, like that. But our perception of it is the final color that we see. Through insight, we see, okay, the one color is gone, we see the next one. Penetrating vision will remove that one. Penetrating vision will remove that one. Let's say there are 6 of them. And then finally we see, there's the original light as it is in its pristine condition. And then we may realize we don't have to get from A to B. We don't have to acquire something. There's no goal about it. It's simply uncovering what is already there. So yesterday, being 4th of July, I talked about independence and freedom. Well, we're all looking for freedom as if we don't have it. The realized position is we have it here. We have it now. We don't have to acquire anything or get anything, or be impatient and look out the window. When is it coming? When is it coming? No future orientation about it, since it's here. If you say, when will you give me spectacles? Well, Swami, do you realize you have them sitting on your nose? Oh, okay, yes, okay. When will the sun shine? In the daytime? Well, please open your curtains and you'll see. So when we open, we get a revelation. If we remain closed, then we don't get it. The whole of life is urging us to get it. And the will for freedom, political freedom, gender freedom, whatever it is really a symptom, if you like. It's an evidence that our fundamental nature is what we need to get back to, as it were. We need to reveal what we already have, our own innate freedom. And we do that by shifting our perspective. There's no absolute position. Things look different from different points of view. And that's not immediately evident for us because we tend to look at things in a standard way. Like an astronomer looking at the stars through a telescope. There'll be a standard view. All telescopes will look the same. But then we can look at the telescope because we're not attached to it. We have the freedom to look through it or at it. We also have the freedom to look away from it. That's true freedom. So when we look at the telescope, that is, when we look at the mind, then we understand its psychology. We understand its operation, how it works, how it reacts. And then when we see what is behind the mind, we have a different point of view. It's an additional point of view. It's a point of view which is a plus point of view. When we look out in the world, what do we see? Is it real? Yes, but it's relative to the sense organs. That provision we have to take. Then, well, what about the world of ideas? What about idealism? Yes, that's also true. The mind is also true. It's much more subtle. No boundaries are seen. If you think of an elephant, don't think that the elephant, you can fit a whole elephant into your head. That's not the way it works. And yet we see the elephant in our mind's eye and in a dream. And then that's also true. And then what else is true when we have a more penetrating vision? We see that the capacity to shine a light of knowledge is true. And we also see that an area of sublime bliss is true. And we also see then that the eternal self is the only permanent truth. The rest is a reflection of it. It's just a modification, as it were, of it. How do you modify the unchanging self? You don't do it. It seems to be like that. It looks as if it is. It's the great, glorious, universal picture show. So where does it all come from? It comes from a cosmic mind. This is the answer to one of the questions. From there it comes, and then the next logical question is, well, it sounds simple, we understand is Om, what is that? See? And if you meditate on the three contributing sound symbols of Om, if you meditate on Ah, then you'll get material rewards. It stands for matter, it's the external part of it. Then if you meditate on the intermediate thing, you're meditating on the intermediate things, the interspace. You're meditating on the mind. And then meditating on you're meditating on the non-dual aspect of consciousness. Now these things combined, and we take the fourth state, which the Mandukya Upanishad mentions, but the Prajna does not. It takes it now a little further and mentions what is Om and the glory of Om, and includes there the whole totality of the picture. So we don't say that the material world gets eliminated. We don't say that the dream world gets eliminated. We don't say that the state of unity gets eliminated. We accept all of it. It is all true. Is matter true? Yes. Is idealization, the world of ideas, true? Yes. And so it goes on. Is God true? Yes. We call it cosmic mind. Personal God. Is the impersonal, omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, is this also true? Yes, that is also true. We're not denying anything. We're simply supplementing every position. Then ultimately is the one source, the one without a second, the supreme principle, Brahman, that has no time or space in it, that is unending, it is unchanging, it is infinite, it is undivided. Yes, that is also true, but when we discover it, all the other things disappear. Now, all this knowledge is coiled up within us. We don't have to get it from the outside. And when we start uncoiling it through insight, then we uncoil different layers and levels of consciousness. And Kundalini means thing that is coiled up. And through concentration and clarification it starts unfolding. It unfolds gradually, and Ramakrishna describes it in various ways. Some days it's like a monkey jumping, sometimes it's like a snake going up. Sometimes it's like the mercury inside a thermometer and so on, like this. Now this comes from somebody who is feeling it, but not denying it. You feel it, and the whole range you feel ultimately. Each stage is seeing, and the ultimate is also seeing. So just to summarize the short answer to your question, can we see God? Yes. Yes, we can. Should we see God? Yes. Should we see beyond God? Yes. You see, the mystic Meister Eckhart made this wonderful division, which was puzzling to theologians. He made mention of God and the Godhead. And Meister Eckhart, before they could close him down and his ideas, he died. His body went off. But this is a clear distinction. And he was not only a mystic, but he was also an intellectual. He was a professor teaching theology. So Krishna describes it so beautifully. Some people have heard about milk. Some people have seen it. But there are some people who have tasted it. And it's only the tasting equating to seeing, which is there, and more, because ultimately the seer will reside in its own nature, and the seer can never be seen, and the ultimate hearer can never be heard, and the knower can never be known, and the thinker can never be thought of. It remains in its pristine condition, as it were, and all the relative world disappears. You cannot have the relative world and this absolute simultaneously operating, or simultaneously being experienced. When we enter into the absolute, the relative world is gone. Just as when we enter into a deep sleep, all the worlds are gone. Same thing. And when we come back, the relative world is there, but a realized soul will see it with a difference. They'll see it simply as the game, the play, the Leela of the divine, with the divine himself or itself playing the parts. Imagine a play that is directed, manufactured, all the actors are he, all the parts are he, all the lines are he, all the scenery is here, the director is he, the producer is he, everything is he. That realization comes, that enables us to understand, firstly, the kingdom of heaven is within us, and there is a Father in heaven. That language can be there. And then I am the vine and you are the branches. That language is there in Jesus. And then ultimately, I am the Father, are one. This is the non-dual position. And these three positions are not contradictory. They're supplementary. And we can't say this exclusively to this person or that person. And that because of history, it can never happen today. Of course, if that is your true nature, you can have it today. Ramakrishna gave the example, a cave that is dark for 1,000 years. How long does it take for it to be lit? Well, you strike a match and that's it. And additional to that, the Irish have a very wonderful saying. It's better to light a candle than to curse the dark. Very often we sit and curse the dark all the time, complaining. Well, it's better to light a candle. When you have some kind of obstacle in life, which will always be there, you find a way around it. And that being that produces the obstacle will also produce the solution. You just have to learn to look at things from a different point of view. What is the wiring that Jesus had that made a blind man see and a deaf man hear and a lame man walk and a dead man wake up? It's because he had a penetrating vision and saw the perfection of the Lord of the universe, the Father in heaven, there and then. He has seen the Father has seen the Son, and we presume we can say the other way around. He has seen the Son, has seen the Father. So the alignment is so much, so close, that we have no option but to see this divinity shining through. A realized person who cannot hide the light under a bushel or a bed will beam its light everywhere for everyone, for the good of humanity. And so, not only can we see God, but we see God in these highest ideals of examples. A Krishna, a Holy Mother, a Vivekananda, all these great teachers and saints, a Jesus, a Buddha, a Krishna, a Rama. Now see it also in a tree, see it in a flower, see it in a cloud, see it in the sun, see it in the moon, see it in your breath, see it in your heartbeat, see it in your friend, see it in your enemy, see it in the eyes that shine, see it in the speech that gets expressed. It's everywhere. Open your eyes and whatever you see is God. Get used to it. Well, we may have dealt with that question, probably, so there may be some other questions. Wonderful question. Thank you.
Yes, Swami, you just said that we can see God in ourselves, like in guided meditation, in the heart, in the breath, and so on. But at the same time, a devotee was telling you he was fasting, and you told him that this body is full of impure things. So how do you reconcile the 2 points of view? This body is God, but maybe is animated by God, but at the same time it's full of impure things. How do you reconcile the 2 aspects?
Yes, okay. I once read a Reader's Digest article on health. It said, I'm paraphrasing, it said, the wonder of the human body is not in its sickness, but it is in its health. A small teardrop is effective as a germ killer containing Lysol when it's diluted in 20-liter bucket of water. The saliva is a germ killer. The cilia, which can catch foreign objects, giving you coughing and so on and so forth, taking off external objects, is there as a protection. If anything gets past there, hydrochloric acid is sitting in the stomach. And if anything gets past there and gets into the bloodstream, you have millions and millions of antibodies to deal with the issue. There's a wonderful complex thing called the human body. But, of course, if we don't like substances that we're not used to, phlegm, blood, bile, this is, I'm quoting here from the Vivekeshudamani. He gives us the graphic description of the human body. You see, we have to look at it as a machine. When we see a machine in a factory, we don't say, I don't like this machine because it runs on oil, and I don't like the smell of oil, and I don't like the viscosity of it, and I don't like how it makes stains on the floor, and I see it as not a good thing. No, the machine wants it. It is useful to the machine. So the human body is a machine, but it's a divine machine. Now that's, of course, the one way of looking at it. When we break it down, we see it as a collection of cells. And in modern science, we still do not fully understand how the cell works and operates. It's a mystery. Modern physiology has studied it and sees that it is a most amazing, systematic machine. There are cartoons worth seeing of the operation of the various repair mechanisms within the body, the process of the RNA duplication, and filling in for possible mistakes of duplication in the body. It's a most wonderful machine. So why does it go wrong? It goes wrong because we don't treat it properly. If you don't give your oil if you don't give your car the proper fuel, if you don't give it the proper maintenance, if you don't put oil in it, if you don't run it, if you don't clean it, then it will break down. So the body is the most marvelous thing. It knows how to cure itself. The blood has this knowledge, provided it is free from toxic material. If we truly revered this machine, then we would then treat it in a different way. We'd be extremely careful about it. We'd exercise it and so on and so forth. We're all a little careless. I'm also careless about it very often. So we have to take it as, we have to revalue it as a personal possession and re-register it as God's housing or God's earth car. And it is through the body and through the mind that we see God. The eyes see, but you see, what do they see? They have to see God. So where is this God? It's in everything that we see, including the body and mind and so on and so forth. Anything that has parts. And the rule in philosophy is anything that has parts is not for its own good, it's for the good of an independent entity that uses it. A door has many parts, so we can walk through it. A car has many parts, so we can drive it. A body has many parts, so we can use it. And so it's a most amazing machine. The first problem with the machine will come when our thinking is not right. Wrong thinking will cause many, many difficulties within the body. A single thought will enter into every cell of the body and have its game there. When a person has a dull life, for example, not a very interesting life, then the thyroid becomes less active. It's not very active. And so in yoga, we do the fish pose, Matsyasana, and the chin lock and the Sarvangasana, all these things, will correct both the overactive and the underactive thyroid gland, as an example only. See, anemia, for example. Anemia, a lack of iron in the blood, it occurs when the system is clogged with unwanted material, nothing more, nothing less. God made a good machine, but we tend to spoil it. So don't put wrong pictures also in the mind, because these can cause disease. Instantaneously, they can cause it. And then if you continually have a frame of mind where you compare yourself with other people and burn inside, then you'll get a concentrated ulcer. Now, all of these things, somebody called Louise Hayes has systematically said, if you think like this, you get that. If you do this, you'll get that. He correlates all the mental conditions to physical conditions. So the body responds to your secret thoughts. You have to understand that straight away, and gives a stress disease. And if your body breaks down in spite of exercise even, then the reason is very clear. You're secretly miserable. So change your thinking. And then clean the body, clean the mind. You do exercise, you have to shift the lymph around. The lymphatic system has no independent pumping mechanism, and it carries all the nutrition and all the waste products. So God made the body, why not let him in? So stop being miserable to start with. Put mature ideas there. Don't secretly compare yourself with others and crumble. That would be a mistake. Engage in art. See, art and religion and reasoning, they must be put in as positive thoughts continuously. This is the value of these beautiful churches. So I know that they're based somewhere in France and so on, and many, many beautiful churches are there, and all filled with the capacity to elevate the mind to a higher state, to inspire us. An ordinary building doesn't do it. Glass and steel don't have the same effect. Modern architecture does not quite have the same effect, even though some have a beauty of their own, no doubt. A kind of simplicity to them. But more than that, it's engineering functionality. So if we talk about healing ourselves or even others, then the person must want to be healed also. You must want things to work correctly, smoothly. And if you do that, you fill up with all the positives. Every single cell of the body will vibrate well with joy if your thoughts are joyful. And then the basic maintenance, eating the right things, getting enough sleep, exercising correctly, and so all of these various things. I'm not saying that there's no remedy for falling over and breaking your arm. This is just one of those things, naturally. But internally, we have only two things that are within the scope of our control, the body and the mind. And we have to take mastery over both. And we have the capacity to do that. So we can say that the physical body is an expression of divine grace. And when we exercise, you see, or eat or do any of these activities, we're expressing the joy which is already there. There's a great difference, you see, between physical exercise, wanting to achieve something, and laboring under a certain element of stress in doing it, to say, okay, I have a goal in mind, to stretching. Yawning is a wonderful facial stretch. And we don't say, I have a great difficulty in doing this, I need to achieve something by doing this. No, we take all of that away. It's an expression of something. When we get up in the morning and have a good stretch and stretch the arms and the legs and so on, we're not trying to achieve anything, we're enjoying the stretch. And a cat does the same thing. A cat just leisurely stretches out, curves the spine nicely, puts the tail up in the air, stretches forward, yawns a little bit, and shakes a little bit, and then goes licks maybe a little bit, does some washing of the fur, and then saunters off. We have a lot to learn from cats, you know.
Thank you, Swami. Yes, thank you.
Good. Well, we'll leave it there. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.